Keisha Williams walked into First National Bank on a warm Tuesday morning in June. She was wearing her best clothes, a simple blue dress and black shoes that she had polished the night before. At 23 years old, she had worked hard to save enough money to start her own small business. She wanted to open a bakery in her neighborhood, and today was the day she would apply for a small business loan. The bank was located in a nice part of town, far from the small apartment she shared with her grandmother in the east side of the city. Keisha had taken 2 buses to get there because she had heard this bank had good rates for new business owners. She clutched her folder full of documents close to her chest. Inside were her business plan, her financial records, and letters of recommendation from her community college teachers. As she stepped through the glass doors, she noticed how clean and quiet everything was. The floors were shiny, and soft music played from somewhere above. There were only a few customers inside, and most of them were sitting in comfortable chairs, waiting to be helped. Keisha walked up to the front desk, where a young woman with blonde hair sat behind a computer. The woman looked up and smiled, but Keisha noticed something change in her eyes when she saw her. "Can I help you?" the woman asked. Her name tag said Jennifer. "Yes, I would like to speak with someone about a small business loan," Keisha said politely. She had practiced what she would say many times. Jennifer looked at her for a moment, then glanced down at her computer screen. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I do not, but I was hoping someone might be available to help me today." Jennifer sighed and picked up her phone. "Let me check if anyone is free." She pressed a button and waited. "Mr. Harrison, there is someone here to see about a loan." "She does not have an appointment." There was a pause. "Okay, I will tell her." Jennifer put down the phone and looked at Keisha with a polite but distant smile. "Mr. Harrison, we'll see you in about 15 minutes. Please, have a seat over there." Keisha thanked her and walked over to the waiting area. She sat down in one of the leather chairs and placed her folder on her lap. She watched as other customers came and went. Most of them were helped quickly, while she continued to wait. 30 minutes passed! Then, Keisha kept looking at the clock on the wall and then at the desk where Jennifer sat. Each time she caught Jennifer's eye, the woman would look away quickly. Finally, after nearly an hour, a man in a gray suit walked over to her. He was tall, with graying hair and a stern face. He looked down at Keisha without offering his hand. "I am Mr. Harrison," he said. "You are here about a loan?" "Yes, sir. I would like to apply for a small business loan to open a bakery." Mr. Harrison looked at her folder and then back at her face. "Follow me," he said flatly. They walked through the bank to a small office in the back. The room had a desk, 2 chairs, and a window that looked out onto a parking lot. Mr. Harrison sat behind the desk and gestured for Keisha to sit across from him. "So, you want to open a bakery?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "Do you have any experience running a business?" "I have been baking and selling cakes and cookies for the past 3 years, Keisha explained. "I started small, just for friends and family, but then more and more people started ordering from me. I have regular customers now, and I believe I am ready to open a real shop." Mr. Harrison raised an eyebrow. "And where would this shop be located?" "On Martin Luther King Boulevard, in the Eastwood neighborhood." Something changed in Mr. Harrison's face when she mentioned the location. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he shifted in his seat. "That is a very risky area for a new business." "Lots of crime!" Lots of problems. Keisha felt her heart sink a little, but she kept her voice steady. I grew up in that neighborhood. Mr. Harrison, I know the people there. They are good people who would support a local business. I have done my research, and I believe it can work. She opened her folder and began to take out her papers. I have my business plan here, along with financial projections, and that will not be necessary. Mr. Harrison interrupted, holding up his hand. I have already seen enough. Keisha stopped. What do you mean? Mr. Harrison sighed as if he was explaining something to a child. Look, Mr. Williams, is it? I am going to be honest with you. The bank does not usually approve loans for businesses in areas like yours. The risk is too high, and frankly, most people from your background do not have the experience or the education to run a successful business. Keisha felt her face grow hot. She could not believe what she was hearing. My background. What do you mean by that? Mr. Harrison leaned forward. I mean that people like you tend to fail at these things. You might have good intentions, but you do not have what it takes. Why do you not try getting a regular job first? Save up some money, the old-fashioned way. Keisha's hands were shaking, but she forced herself to stay calm. Mr. Harrison, I have worked very hard to prepare for this. I graduated from community college with honors. I have 3 years of experience running my own baking business. I have saved money and created a solid business plan. With all due respect, you have not even looked at my papers. Mr. Harrison shook his head. It does not matter what is in those papers. The answer is no. This bank is not going to give you a loan. Tears burned in Keisha's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had expected some challenges, but she had not expected this kind of treatment. It was clear that Mr. Harrison was not rejecting her because of her business plan. He was rejecting her because of the color of her skin. What Mr. Harrison did not know was that Keisha had started recording the conversation on her phone the moment they sat down. Her grandmother had always told her to protect herself, and now Keisha was glad she had listened. The phone sat in her purse, just below the edge of the desk, capturing every word. Is there nothing I can do to change your mind? Keisha asked, giving him one last chance. Nothing, Mr. Harrison said firmly. Now, if you will excuse me, I have real customers to attend to. The word hit her like a slap. Real customers. As if she was not real. As if she did not matter. Keisha stood up slowly, gathering her folder and her purse. Thank you for your time, Mr. Harrison, she said, her voice barely hiding her anger. I think I have everything I need. She walked out of the office with her head held high, past the waiting area, past Jennifer at the front desk, and out through the glass doors into the warm summer air. Only when she was standing at the bus stop did she allow a single tear to roll down her cheek. But that tear was not just sadness. It was determination. Keisha Williams was not going to let Mr. Harrison win. She had a recording, and she was going to use it. That night, Keisha sat at the small kitchen table in her grandmother's apartment. Her laptop open in front of her. Her grandmother, a woman named Dorothy, who everyone called Grandma Dot, sat beside her with a cup of tea. Play it again, Grandma Dot said quietly. Keisha pressed play on the audio file. Mr. Harrison's voice filled the small kitchen. His words, cold and dismissive. When he said, people like you, Grandma Dot's face hardened. That man has no shame, she said, shaking her head. In all my 72 years, I have heard words like that too many times. But I never thought I would hear my own granddaughter be treated this way in a bank. What should I do, Grandma? Keisha asked. Should I post it online? Should I go to the news? Should I report it to someone? Grandma Dot reached over and took Keisha's hand. You have to think carefully, baby. Once you put something out there, you cannot take it back. But you also cannot let people treat you this way without speaking up. Your grandfather marched in protests so that you would not have to face this kind of thing. But here we are. Keisha thought about her grandfather, a man she had never met but had heard stories about her whole life. He had fought for civil rights in the 1960s. He had been arrested, beaten, and sprayed with fire hoses. And he had never given up. I think I need to share this, Keisha said finally. Not just for me. For everyone who has been treated this way and could not prove it. I have proof. Grandma, I have his words. Grandma Dot nodded slowly. Then do what you need to do. But be ready for what comes next. The world does not always reward those who tell the truth. Keisha stayed up most of the night thinking about what to do. By morning, she had made her decision. She would post the recording online, along with a written account of what had happened. She would tell her story and let the world judge for itself. She created a new social media account just for this purpose. She called it Justice for Keisha. Then she uploaded the audio file and wrote a long post explaining everything. She described her visit to the bank, her conversation with Mr. Harrison, and the words he had used. She shared her business plan, her credentials, and her dream of opening a bakery to serve her community. At the end of her post, she wrote, I am not sharing this for sympathy. I am sharing this because I know I am not the only one. If you have ever been turned away, talked down to, or treated as less than because of the color of your skin, I want you to know that you are not alone. We deserve better. I deserve better. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed the button to post it. Within seconds, her story was out there for the whole world to see. For the first few hours, nothing happened. Keisha checked her phone constantly, but there were only a few likes and a couple of comments from people she did not know. She started to wonder if anyone would even care. But then, something changed. A local journalist named Angela Torres saw the post and shared it on her own account. Angela had a large following and was known for covering stories about social justice. Within an hour, thousands of people had seen Keisha's story. By nightfall, the recording had been played over 100,000 times. People were sharing it, commenting on it, and expressing their outrage. News stations started calling Keisha's phone, asking for interviews. Reporters showed up at her grandmother's apartment building, hoping to get a statement. Keisha was overwhelmed. She had expected some attention, but nothing like this. She turned off her phone and sat in silence with Grandma Dot, trying to understand what was happening. You have started something, baby, Grandma Dot said softly. Now you have to see it through. The next morning, Keisha woke up to find that her story had gone viral. The recording of Mr. Harrison's words was everywhere. People were using hashtags like treat all customers equal and justice for Keisha. Some people were even calling for a boycott of First National Bank, but not everyone was supportive. Some people accused Keisha of lying. Others said she was just trying to get attention. A few people even sent her hateful messages using words that made her stomach turn. But for every hateful message, there were 10 more from people who stood with her, shared their own stories, and told her to keep fighting. Keisha knew this was just the beginning. The news spread faster than anyone expected. Within 3 days, Keisha's story was being discussed on national television. Talk show hosts played the recording and shook their heads in disbelief. Politicians made statements condemning discrimination in banking. Civil rights organizations reached out to offer their support. First National Bank found itself at the center of a storm. Customers began closing their accounts in protest. Protesters gathered outside branches across the city, holding signs and chanting for change. The bank's stock price dropped, and investors started asking questions. Inside the bank's headquarters, there was panic. Executives held emergency meetings to discuss how to handle the crisis. Some wanted to defend Mr. Harrison and deny that anything wrong had happened. Others argued that they needed to take swift action to save the bank's reputation. Mr. Harrison, meanwhile, was hiding. He refused to speak to the press and stayed home from work. He told his wife that the whole thing was a misunderstanding, that the recording had been edited to make him look bad. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had said those words, and now the whole world had heard them. On the fourth day, First National Bank released a statement. In it, they announced that Mr. Harrison had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. They also promised to review their lending practices and conduct diversity training for all employees. But many people felt this was not enough. They wanted Mr. Harrison to be fired, not just placed on leave. They wanted the bank to admit what had happened and take real steps to fix it. The protests continued, and the pressure kept growing. Keisha watched all of this from her grandmother's apartment. She was interviewed by reporters, appeared on local news programs, and even received an invitation to speak at a community event. But, through it all, she stayed focused on her original goal: to open her bakery and serve her community. 1 week after the recording went viral, Keisha received a phone call that changed everything. It was from a woman named Patricia Cole, the president of a nonprofit organization that supported minority-owned businesses. Patricia had seen Keisha's story and wanted to help. "I believe in you," Patricia said on the phone. "I believe in your dream, and I want to help make it happen. We have a fund that provides loans and grants to people just like you. Would you be willing to meet with us?" Keisha could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Yes, I would love that." 2 days later, Keisha sat in a conference room with Patricia and 2 other members of her organization. They reviewed her business plan, asked her questions about her experience, and discussed her goals. Unlike Mr. Harrison, they treated her with respect and took her seriously. At the end of the meeting, Patricia smiled and shook Keisha's hand. "Congratulations," she said. "We are going to fund your bakery." Keisha burst into tears. After everything she had been through, she had finally found someone who believed in her. The news that Keisha had secured funding for her bakery was celebrated across social media. People who had followed her story from the beginning cheered for her success. News outlets that had covered the scandal at First National Bank now reported on her triumph. The hashtag Keisha's Bakery started trending. But the story was not over yet. First National Bank still had to decide what to do with Mr. Harrison. The internal investigation had been completed, and the results were clear. Mr. Harrison had violated company policy and discriminated against Keisha based on her race. The bank's executives met one final time to make their decision. After hours of discussion, they announced that Mr. Harrison had been terminated from his position. He would not be allowed to work in the banking industry again, and the bank would make a public apology to Keisha Williams. When Keisha heard the news, she felt a mix of emotions. She was relieved that Mr. Harrison had been held accountable, but she also felt sad. She had never wanted to destroy anyone's life. She had only wanted to be treated fairly. "I am not happy about what happened to Mr. Harrison," she told a reporter who asked for her reaction. I hope he learns from this and becomes a better person. But I am glad that the bank is taking this seriously. No one should be treated the way I was treated. Grandma Dot watched the interview from her favorite chair and nodded with pride. That is my granddaughter, she said to herself, speaking truth with grace. The support for Keisha continued to grow in the weeks that followed. People from all over the country sent her messages of encouragement. Some sent money to help with her business. Others offered to volunteer their time once the bakery opened. Keisha was touched by the outpouring of love, but she was also determined to work hard and earn her success. She spent long hours planning the menu, designing the layout of the shop, and meeting with contractors. She wanted her bakery to be more than just a place to buy sweets. She wanted it to be a place where people from the community could gather, connect, and feel welcome. She decided to name the bakery Grandma Dot's Sweet Dreams in honor of the woman who had raised her and believed in her when no one else did. Meanwhile, the conversation about discrimination in banking continued. News organizations investigated other cases of unfair treatment. Lawmakers proposed new rules to prevent discrimination in lending. Banks across the country announced reforms and new training programs. Keisha had not set out to start a movement, but that is exactly what had happened. Her courage in speaking up had opened doors for others to share their stories too. People who had been silent for years now felt empowered to stand up for their rights. 1 month after the recording was first posted, Keisha stood in front of an empty storefront on Martin Luther King Boulevard. The windows were dusty and the paint was peeling, but Keisha could already see what it would become. She could picture the display cases filled with cakes and cookies. She could imagine the smell of fresh bread and coffee. She could hear the laughter of customers and the ringing of the cash register. This is just the beginning, she whispered to herself. And she was right. The best was yet to come. As the weeks turned into months, Keisha poured every ounce of her energy into building her bakery. The empty storefront on Martin Luther King Boulevard slowly transformed into a warm and welcoming space. She painted the walls a soft yellow, her grandmother's favorite color. She installed a large glass display case to showcase her baked goods. She set up small tables and chairs where customers could sit and enjoy their treats. The community came together to help in ways Keisha had never expected. Local volunteers showed up on weekends to help with painting and cleaning. A carpenter who had seen her story on the news offered to build custom shelving at no cost. An artist from the neighborhood painted a beautiful mural on the side of the building, featuring colorful cakes, rising bread, and the words baked with love. Grandma Dot supervised everything from a chair Keisha had placed near the window. She could not do much physical work anymore, but her presence alone was a source of comfort and inspiration. She told stories about the old days, shared recipes that had been passed down through generations, and offered advice whenever Keisha felt overwhelmed. Remember, Grandma Dot said one evening as they sat together in the half-finished shop, this is about more than just cakes and cookies. This is about giving our people a place to feel proud. A place that belongs to us. Keisha nodded, feeling the weight of those words. She understood that her bakery was part of something bigger than herself. It was a symbol of hope for a community that had been overlooked for too long. The grand opening was set for a Saturday in October, exactly 5 months after Keisha's visit to First National Bank. She sent out invitations to friends, family, and everyone who had supported her along the way. She also reached out to local media, hoping for some coverage. What she did not expect was how many people would actually show up. On the morning of the grand opening, Keisha arrived at the bakery before sunrise. She wanted to make sure everything was perfect. She arranged the pastries in the display case, set out fresh flowers on each table, and hung a banner that read Grand Opening. Grandma Dot's Sweet Dreams. By the time the doors were scheduled to open at 9 o'clock, there was already a line stretching down the block. Keisha looked out the window and could hardly believe her eyes. There were families, children, elderly couples, young professionals, and people she had never seen before. They were all there to support her, and they were not the only ones. News vans had pulled up across the street, and reporters were setting up cameras. A group of local politicians had come to cut the ribbon. Even Patricia Cole, the woman who had helped fund the bakery, was there with a bouquet of flowers. When Keisha finally opened the doors, the crowd cheered. She stood in the doorway with tears in her eyes, unable to speak. Grandma Dot was beside her in a wheelchair, smiling wider than she had in years. "Welcome to Grandma Dot's Sweet Dreams!" Keisha finally managed to say. "Thank you all for believing in me." The first customer was a young boy named Marcus, about 10 years old, who had come with his mother. He ordered a chocolate cupcake and looked up at Keisha with wide eyes. "Is it true you went on the news?" he asked. Keisha smiled and knelt down to his level. "Yes, it is true. Why did you do it?" Keisha thought for a moment. "Because sometimes you have to speak up when something is not right, even if it is scary, especially if it is scary." Marcus nodded seriously, as if he understood something important. Then he took a big bite of his cupcake and grinned. "This is really good." The bakery was packed all day long. People came from all over the city to taste Keisha's creations and to be part of the moment. By the end of the day, she had sold out of almost everything. Her feet ached, her hands were sore, and she was more tired than she had ever been. But she was also happier than she had ever been. That night, after the last customer had left and the doors were closed, Keisha sat alone in the quiet bakery. The lights were dim, and the smell of fresh bread still hung in the air. She looked around at everything she had built and allowed herself to feel proud. Her phone buzzed with a message from an old friend. "You did it, Keisha. You really did it," she typed back. "We did it. All of us." The success of the grand opening was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, business continued to grow. Customers came back again and again, bringing their friends and families. Keisha hired 2 assistants to help with the baking and serving. She started taking orders for birthday cakes, wedding cakes, and catering events. But perhaps the most meaningful change was what happened outside the bakery walls. The story of Keisha and Mr. Harrison had sparked a larger conversation about fairness and equality in the banking industry. Other people began sharing their own experiences, and pressure mounted on financial institutions to change their practices. First National Bank, still recovering from the scandal, announced a new initiative to increase lending to minority-owned businesses. They partnered with community organizations, set up a special fund for underserved neighborhoods, and hired new staff trained in diversity and inclusion. While some people were skeptical, others saw it as a step in the right direction. The man at the center of it all, Mr. Harrison, quietly disappeared from public life. He sold his house and moved to another state, where he took a job in a different industry. Some said he was bitter and angry. Others said he had learned his lesson. Keisha did not know and did not want to know. She had moved on. 1 year after the grand opening, Grandma Dot passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 73 years old and had lived long enough to see her granddaughter's dream come true. Her funeral was held at the church where she had worshipped her whole life, and the building was filled with people who loved her. Keisha spoke at the service, her voice steady even as tears rolled down her face. My grandmother taught me that strength is not about being loud or powerful. It is about standing up for what is right, even when you are afraid. She believed in me when I did not believe in myself, and I will carry her with me for the rest of my life. The bakery continued to thrive in the years that followed. Keisha expanded to a second location and began training young people from the neighborhood to become bakers themselves. She started a scholarship fund for students who wanted to go to culinary school. She became a voice in her community, speaking at events and inspiring others to follow their dreams. But no matter how busy she got, Keisha never forgot why she had started this journey. It was not about fame or money. It was about dignity. It was about respect. It was about proving that anyone, no matter where they came from, could build something beautiful if they were given a fair chance. Every day, when she walked into Grandma Dot's Sweet Dreams, she looked up at the picture hanging on the wall behind the counter. It was a photo of her grandmother, smiling, that familiar smile. And every day, Keisha whispered the same words. We did it, Grandma. We really did it. And somewhere, somehow, she knew her grandmother was smiling back. 3 years after the bakery opened, something unexpected happened that would change Keisha's life once more. She received a letter in the mail, the old-fashioned kind with a handwritten address on the envelope. The return address was from a small town in another state, one she did not recognize. Keisha opened the letter at the counter of her bakery, curious but cautious. As she read the first few lines, her hands began to tremble. The letter was from Mr. Harrison. He wrote that he had spent the past 3 years thinking about what he had done. He admitted that his words that day in his office had been wrong, hurtful, and based on prejudices he had carried his whole life. He said he had lost everything after being fired: his job, his reputation, his friends, and even his marriage. But he also said that losing those things had forced him to look at himself honestly for the first time. He wrote that he had started attending a church in his new town and had been doing volunteer work with underprivileged communities. He had met people from all backgrounds and had realized how wrong he had been about so many things. He asked for nothing except the chance to apologize. I do not expect your forgiveness, he wrote, and I do not deserve it, but I want you to know that your courage that day changed me. I am not the same man I was. I am still learning, still growing, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to do better. Keisha sat down slowly, her mind racing. She had thought about Mr. Harrison many times over the years, but she had never imagined receiving a letter like this. She did not know how to feel. That evening, she showed the letter to her mother, a woman named Diane, who had come to live with her after Grandma Dot passed away. Diane read it silently, then handed it back. What are you going to do? Diane asked. I do not know, Keisha admitted. Part of me is still angry. Part of me does not believe him. But another part of me wants to believe that people can change. Diane nodded. Your grandmother always said that forgiveness is not for the other person. It is for yourself. It is about letting go of the weight so you can move forward. Keisha thought about those words for a long time. She did not respond to the letter right away. Instead, she let it sit on her dresser for weeks, reading it again and again whenever she needed to think. Finally, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, she sat down and wrote a reply. It was short and simple. She thanked Mr. Harrison for his honesty. She told him that she was glad he was working to become a better person. She said she could not forget what had happened, but she was willing to let go of the anger. "I hope you find peace," she wrote at the end. "And I hope you use your story to help others avoid making the same mistakes." She sealed the letter and mailed it the next morning. When she walked back into the bakery afterward, she felt lighter than she had in a long time. The years continued to pass, and Keisha's story became part of local history. Teachers told it in classrooms. Community leaders referenced it in speeches. Young people who had never met Keisha knew her name and what she had done, but Keisha herself remained humble. She never forgot where she came from or the struggles she had faced. She opened a third bakery location and turned one into a training center for young entrepreneurs. She wrote a book about her experiences and donated the profits to charity. She traveled across the country, speaking at conferences and universities about the importance of standing up for justice. And through it all, she kept the two things that mattered most: her grandmother's photo on the wall and the recipe book Grandma Dot had given her when she was just a little girl. On the 10th anniversary of her first bakery's opening, Keisha organized a celebration unlike anything the neighborhood had ever seen. There was music, dancing, free samples of all her best creations, and speeches from community leaders. The mayor presented her with a key to the city. Children lined up to take pictures with her. News crews from all over came to cover the event. At the end of the night, when the crowds had finally gone home and the streets were quiet again, Keisha stood alone in front of her original bakery. The paint was still bright, the windows still sparkled, and the mural on the side was as beautiful as ever. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The rejection at the bank, the recording, the fear and the doubt, the love and the support, the loss of her grandmother, the letter from Mr. Harrison, the thousands of people who had walked through her doors over the years, and she realized something important. The most meaningful part of her story was not the success or the recognition. It was the journey itself, the struggle, the growth, and the connections she had made along the way. She had started with a simple dream, to bake cakes and share them with her community. And in the process, she had built something far greater than she ever imagined. As she locked the door and began the walk home, Keisha smiled to herself. She did not know what the future would bring, but she knew she was ready for it, whatever came next. She would face it the same way she had faced everything else, with courage, with grace, and with love. The next chapter of her life was waiting, and she could not wait to begin.